I want to talk about Palestinian nationalism. There are some people within the pro-Israel community that feel that the whole concept of a nation-state of Palestine for the Arabs only really arose in response to calls for a Jewish state, and was even some might even go so far as to say just a cynical. They don't like. There isn't really much of a desire for Palestinian nationalism. They see themselves more. Most of them see themselves more just as Arabs, and that the call for Palestinian nationalism was really a cynical ploy to prevent or to counteract calls for a Jewish state. What do you think about that?
Nationalism was something that in the early 20th century was on the rise, this notion of nationalism and nation statehood. And so we do see that it followed Zionism. And you can't argue that, Zionism, Jewish Zionism, the Jewish nationalism, rose in 1897. It was the first Zionist Congress. This was when the Jews started to discuss this notion of Jewish statehood. And there are no hints of Palestinian nationalism at that time. This will all come around later. Now, is that in response to Jewish nationalism? You have to look at history, causation, correlation. There was definitely a correlation there. Causation, I'm not going to say. Today, there is very strong Palestinian nationalism, and polls show that very clearly.
But I'm asking if its roots come from a cynical ploy, or whether you think this is authentic.
I think it's very hard to say. Because I think nationalism is a personal thing. There were a lot of Jews in the 30s and the 40s, well, less the 40s, but in the 20s and the 30s who said, why do Jews need a country? Look, we're living in France, we're living in Germany, and we're emancipated and we're assimilated and we have basically equal rights. So it was a personal thing. Was there a mass movement? No. But as time went on in the 70s, the 80s, there was a movement. And I think, yes, there are some who say that if they had won in 1947, this would have just been or 1948, this would have just been another Arab country, and it wouldn't have been Palestinian distinctly. That a Palestinian identity, a unique individual Palestinian nationalism, only emerged after the War of Independence, which I think there's a lot of evidence to support. Even Haj Amin al-Husseini, right, who was supposed to be kind of the leader of the Arabs of Palestine, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem throughout the 20s and the 30s, even he very rarely spoke about independent Palestinian nationalism. He actually spoke about the territory becoming part of southern Syria, or being southern Syria, being a part of Syria. So he didn't even speak about independent Palestinian nationalism. It wasn't even until 1947 where he, for the first time, said to the Arab League, can we create a Palestinian government in exile? Ironically, the Arab League said no. And so it really won't be until really the establishment of the PLO in 1964. You had Fatah in 1959 to be the start of it. But 64, with the establishment of the Palestine Liberation Organization, will really be a moment where you'll start to see Palestinian nationalism. And yes, was it a counter to Zionism? I think there's a lot of evidence to point to that. But today, the person being born in a Palestinian home in Ramallah, or in Bethlehem, or in Gaza, who very much says, these are my people, and I want a land of my own and a place of my own, I think that's very real nationalism, regardless of its roots. So I think we need to look at the whole picture.
But I do think nationalism's roots are important. We've just spent a long time talking about the Jewish people's roots of nationalism going back 3,000 years, constantly yearning for a land, and if the roots of Palestinian nationalism is really just to stop a Jewish state. You say, well, it's authentic now because that's how they've been raised. Well, I mean, is it? I don't know.
Again, I don't think that's a question that I can answer, because I think it's really going and speaking to different Palestinians and saying, what is your nationalism all about? And I don't like dabbling in anecdotal evidence because I don't think it's evidence. But if you speak to Palestinians, I almost never hear them say today that their nationalism is about Israel. It's about them wanting to be free and wanting independence. And so, yeah, the roots could be cynical, and the roots could be, I don't know, look at American nationalism. Was that just to brush off our British, the British control? And didn't it start as just a counter to the British? And now it's become something very real. I don't know.
I don't know if it was entirely counter to the British. I think it was more to do with a set of ideals for how they wanted to
Eventually.
what kind of country they wanted to create.
Eventually. But it was about independence.
Yeah.
It was about wanting to be free.
Yeah.
Taxation without representation. Like, there were all these concepts.
Right.
And so I think sometimes nationalism is about being free from somebody else. And I think Palestinian nationalism became about being free from Israel. Again, lots of conjecture here, and I think that's really important to state. Like, I dabble mostly in facts, and I think this one is hard when it comes to factual evidence.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button, and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.